state, local, urban, rural. Does anything change in the approach in terms of, how you're, attacking the problem sets when you get to the community?
Doing research on the community. What is the cultural, political environment? What are some big wins they've had? Are there any challenges that are, have risen to the forefront that we need to be aware of?
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 3. This is Inside Steer, Conversations with Experts. This is a series where we meet some of the people working at Steer and shaping thought and work across North America. Hi, I'm Herb Higginbotham. I'm Executive President of Steer North America. We're a global consultancy that supports public and private organizations that deliver critical services and infrastructure that move and shape our communities. I'm coming from Los Angeles and really excited today to be joined by Nicole Muise-Kielkucki in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, Herb.
Nicole is part of our Fourth Economy team. Fourth Economy is a community economic development arm of Steer North America. And in particular, Nicole's been leading in economic development work. She's going to talk a little bit about that with us today. She works across regions in the United States, and clients, your clients, Nicole, you're telling me are like public sector, private sector, nonprofit, sort of like anyone that's helping the community sort of move and shape the vision for the future. So we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation today about what's going on in the economic development space right now. Nicole, how is everything in Pittsburgh today?
Everything in Pittsburgh is great. It's always great to be in Pittsburgh. It's my new adopted home. I've been here for almost 20 years.
That's amazing. And I cannot let the moment go past to say Pittsburgh is my hometown. So I'm really great to talk to you today. Say hi to all the locals when you get out of this session. Nicole, tell us a little bit about your role in Fourth Economy. What are you up to when you go to work every day?
Yeah, absolutely. So my role at Steer, Fourth Economy, I lead a lot of our economic development strategy work. So I'd say, the majority of the work that I do is doing strategic planning with communities to really plan for their future. So like you mentioned, our clients are very wide ranging. The majority are city, state, local, and regional governments, but we also have a healthy dose of nonprofits, and those could be, chambers or EDOs, but they could also be community foundations and others in that kind of social services space. We also work with a few private clients, especially when we're doing economic development, impact analysis, site planning, that sort of thing. So very varied in terms of size, scale, type of client, and geography. We work all over the country. Even though I'm based in Pittsburgh, I get to do a lot of Pennsylvania-based work, but I also get to do work outside of the state, which is really great.
That's so cool. Nicole, what's keeping them up at night? And by virtue of that, then what's keeping you up at night? I mean, with such a wide set of clients, are the problems that you see, are they specific to different regions or different, public or private? Like what does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, probably 5 years ago or so, for the economy, we were really, I think, at the forefront of talking about things like childcare or housing as key economic development and workforce needs. I think now, especially post-COVID, the world has caught up, and now almost every single one of our clients recognizes those supports as integral to their workforce support system. So even though that's those are really persistent challenges, I think we're seeing persistent challenges in terms of energy costs. A lot of our clients, a lot of our communities are worried about energy and want to be part of a high tech future and economy, but are also very wary, I think rightly so, about things like data centers. And so we're working with clients to help them really think through those things, because they're complex issues. They're not black and white. We wouldn't say they're good or bad. They're clearly a mix, and there's different ways to go about building these systems in a way that really benefits the community, that doesn't cause undue harm, but also is good for the economy and generates jobs and economic opportunities. So I think those are the types of things that come up a lot in our work. And I think one theme of all of our work here at Fourth Economy, and I think Steer really shares these values. The thing that really I think keeps a lot of us up at night is where we are in sort of the larger political and cultural landscape. We do a lot of equitable development work, and we're in a moment right now where there's language and facts and data are not always, taken at face value these days. So we do a lot of work to sort of combat that and really bring equity and inclusion to the top of our work. That's something that, we've always done, we'll never stop. And I think, really being true to those values and those principles, and having the integrity and sort of fortitude to do so is really important to us as a team. And it's also important to our clients and where we want to go in the future.
Oh, thank you for sharing. It does strike me. I mean, we say this all the time, but we're certainly in a moment where trying to, align the political, the economic, et cetera, so that at a human level, at a very basic human level, that we can provide, a type of service and a type of experience for people in their communities. It's got to be really hard. I, I don't know. I'm immediately struck, rather than talk in the abstract, Nicole. I would love to sort of hear, can you make it a little more real for us? Talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the communities, some of the projects where we're specifically able to, step in, and maybe, if you've had some projects where we can sort of see the impacts of what those are. Like, what does it look like? What does it look like to step in and work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one project that immediately comes to mind is our work with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, working on their first ever statewide housing action plan. So this is a 10-year housing action plan for the entire state of Pennsylvania. This is the first of its kind, and Pennsylvania is really following in the footsteps of other state leaders. Michigan is one who has a fully implemented housing plan, and now they're on to their refresh. So they're really leading, and it's great to see Pennsylvania, where I live, really stepping up to the plate and taking that on. It's a huge endeavor. We know housing is really complex. And as I said, it shows up in nearly all of our work. Even when we don't intend to talk about housing, it somehow shows up in the conversations that we're having with our clients and their stakeholders. So, in this particular project, I think when the project is released, you'll see things featured like, housing for all, and making sure that folks that are vulnerable in our communities have access to resources, that we're looking at the system holistically, from market rate and luxury markets all the way to subsidized and homes for our unhoused populations. So it really spans that gamut, and I'm again really proud of the work that Pennsylvania did. It was a joint project between DCED, which is our Department of Economic and Community Development, PHFA, which is our housing finance agency, and DHS, so our Department of Human Services. So a really nice coalition of state agencies, I think, all working together. We were able to provide some really critical analysis about the state of housing. Our analysis team did a great sort of, this is the status of where we are today in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a very diverse state. It's a big state. It takes 6 hours to drive from one end to the other. And you have big cities like Philly and Pittsburgh, and smaller metros sprinkled out throughout, and of course some very rural areas. So complex to design a housing strategy that works across all of those complex variables. But again, I think Pennsylvania really realized, for us to stay on top economically and compete with other states that are they're vying for our talent and our businesses, and housing is such a critical component for people to be able to keep and attract talent, to attract those businesses and employers, and really, drive well-being for longtime residents. I think that's a big fear we hear about a lot. We want to make sure that improvements benefit all, and that includes folks that have been here for a really long time. So being mindful of impacts of investment and unintentional, consequences of gentrification and that sort of thing. So really rewarding project, really big, in terms of scale and size. And I think it's going to be really impactful in Pennsylvania.
Uh, wow. I mean, there was so much in there. I mean, we could spend the rest of our segment talking about that. I was struck by a couple things. So, number one, as my career sort of was built in transportation, and I always like to say now, when I go out and talk, and hearing you talk about housing, transportation networks and systems, right? Like so many of the communities, ills and positives, right? Sort of roll down to the transportation network. And so, I'd always encourage our transportation partners to talk with the housing groups in their communities, right? At every level, right? Because how housing interacts and interfaces with jobs, interfaces with the institutions, the schools, and other social institutions, how it interacts, and then, how the transportation network distributes us, how the, utility networks are, like all of those are so interconnected. I love that you're sort of starting, with housing where it's all, sort of, it starts in the home, right? And, I have to say, sort of, coming from, Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania to California, where housing and housing prices are out of control. It's so hard to find any part of the state sometimes where you can feel like you can sort of get a handle on that. Can you please come work here next after you solve all of Pennsylvania's challenges?
I love sunny California. I have some relatives out west. I like the seasons. I really like it. So maybe an extended visit to
Projects, yes, and then you can go back. Yeah, you can go back to Pennsylvania. Anything else that you'd want to share in terms of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think one other example again that comes to mind. This is we've worked with York County, Pennsylvania, and sorry, my examples are Pennsylvania. I do work in other places and other markets, but these are two that I'm very proud of. York, Pennsylvania. It's in South Central PA. It's kind of equidistant from Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Harrisburg, which is our state capital. So right on the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland. A lot of commuter flow, a lot of in and out migration in that kind of tri-state area. And again, it's very similar to Pennsylvania as a whole. They're sort of a microcosm. They have the dense city center, the city of York. They also have some growing kind of suburban and exurban areas that are really diverse, are experiencing a lot of immigration, both internationally and sort of some natural population growth. So you have these pockets of kind of like new culture and new community that are rapidly growing. And then you have, a lot of rural area. And York County was built on agriculture. It's a very agricultural community. They're right next to Lancaster. They have a sibling rivalry there. Lancaster is arguably the agriculture capital of our state. A lot of agricultural output coming out of that region. And that all of that matters. We can't plan for the urban areas without thinking about, and suburban without thinking about how that growth might affect the rural areas. It's really important to the community and to someone like me that we're doing both. And I think when you do intentional planning, you can do both. You can sort of designate growth and, encourage density and really work with those assets, and also work to protect and preserve those natural places that, drive, whether it's, agribusiness or outdoor recreation, those pristine resources. We want to keep them, well taken care of and cherished for many generations. So, we started working with York in 2019, late 2019, on their first economic development strategy, the York County Economic Action Plan. We started that, I think, in November. Then fast forward to March 2020, we all know what happened then. And we kind of had to pivot a little bit. We had started this, year-long planning process, but everybody, we were all sort of in crisis mode and sort of trying to figure out, how do we deal with all the things that are happening around us. So we quickly pivoted at that time, since we were actively working with them to produce a set of COVID-19 impact analyses, looking at key data for things like small business and childcare. How might closures, how might this health emergency that we're all experiencing, how might it impact the people that are living and working in York County from an economic opportunity lens. People can't necessarily get to school or to work, so a lot of impacts. That was really helpful to them, I think, in that moment, because they were able to also pivot and say, hey, this is what we're expecting to see. They were actually able to divert resources to, emergency micro loans for small businesses in the community, for example, as a direct result of that work. So really cool to be able to kind of serve our client in that moment with the things that they were dealing with. The Economic Action Plan was adopted late in 2020. They've been at it for 5 years. We just wrapped up a 5-year progress report and update of that plan. They're halfway through the 10-year planning period. So they said, hey, can you help us, figure out and communicate all the progress we've made and what impacts we've made. So we just wrapped that up with them. And in the interim period, over that 5 years, York County Economic Alliance was really able to sort of pick out and tease out some of the recommendations that ended up, being featured in the plan. And we were able to help them with a few other efforts. So, I think in 2022 or 23, we did a housing plan for York County. We at some point during that 5-year period, we also did an arts and culture outdoor asset mapping and impact report for the community. They used that to really advocate for a sustainable public funding source for those kind of arts and cultural and outdoor assets. So we've worked with York County on a number of projects, and it's really cool. We also did a transportation equity study with them and their United Way. So it was really great to see them sort of, really zeroing in on these recommendations. A lot of times we work with clients and communities, and once we finish our planning process, they're sort of on their own, and they really have to take what we recommend and run with it. And York County was fully committed, and they were able to pick out those high impact pieces and, kind of phase it. Where can we get funding for what pieces when, and make a lot of progress in those 5 years. So very rewarding, very impactful. And again, the value of working with a longtime client that, knows us and knows our work. And we enjoy working with them and vice versa. It's just a great relationship to have.
Yeah. And the fact that you got to sort of stay and stick around and as consultants, one of the joys is working on a lot of different things, but sometimes the pain is I give you a plan and I go away. It sounds like you got the best of that experience and that you got to keep sort of moving around the community in different aspects as you're helping.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic. When you tell me, that's a local level, you talked about state level, state, local, urban, rural. Does anything change in the approach in terms of, how you're, attacking the problem sets when you get to the community?
Yeah, it definitely requires a little bit of code switching and changing your approach a little bit. I think we're always one of the first things we do even when we're submitting a proposal is doing research on the community. What is the cultural, political environment? What are some big wins they've had? Are there any challenges that are, have risen to the forefront that we need to be aware of? So I think taking that intelligence and then working with the client, we ask them those questions as well when we start the process. What should we know about? Have there been planning processes recently that worked well, and why? And if not, have you had some that failed, and why do you think that happened? So we're always really intentional, I think, about how how we're gathering information. And not to overgeneralize, because I don't like to, give the impression that all rural communities are the same. I think that's a
Sure.
common pitfall. And same thing, of course, with urban environments as well. Every place is unique, but there are through lines that we see. So when we're working in more rural areas in particular, and this goes for, just low resource communities and community groups,
Mhm.
we're very mindful of capacity. A lot of times in rural communities, for example, you're working with your client who is the town or borough manager, and they're also the head of the chamber, and they also own a business on Main Street. Oh, and they also volunteer for their kids' PTA and run the Christmas parade. So
Right.
really mindful of that sort of thing in rural communities, but even in one program that we are really proud of, another long time project, is here in Allegheny County in Pennsylvania, where Pittsburgh is, and we've been working with the Allegheny County for Economic Development, Community Economic Development for on their business district revitalization program, and that focuses on main streets outside of the city center. And so again, you have these smaller communities. Sometimes they're 2, 3, 4,000 people, to Pittsburgh's 300,000, and they're resource constrained, but they have a really nice historic main street that was bustling at the peak of the industrial era here in Pittsburgh, and they've since experienced population loss, and they're trying to figure out what is our next thing, what is our identity, what's going to drive us
Right.
forward as a community, and how do we keep people here? I mean, we hear that in small places, rural places, we hear that all over the places. How do we keep our kids here? Or once they've moved away, how do we get them back? So,
My
so
mom and
that's,
dad.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course, yeah. And you hope to see that boomerang, but something's got to draw them back, and I think that's where it goes back to the housing conversation. Of course, there has to be job opportunities, but again, people are much more mobile with remote work. There's opportunities for folks to live in that rural community or that picturesque small town outside of a big city, work remotely for a larger company and still contribute to the local economy. So that's one, I think, generalization. I think in some of our kind of larger markets, I think there's a differentiation between big cities that are growing and
Mhm.
big, suburban areas that are growing and those that are still big cities but are in decline. So,
Right.
or staving off decline. So we do a lot of work in the Rust Belt. And again, these are, post-industrial, communities and a lot of manufacturing, and there we're looking at how do we pivot? How do we adopt advanced manufacturing and those things that are going to make this community competitive in the future? The problems in those communities are much different than the problems in a growing suburb. For example, we've worked outside of Atlanta a fair bit, again on housing and economic development, and they're growing rapidly, and so their challenges are much more tied to traffic and safety and again, kind of establishing an identity that they don't want to lose as they grow. Definitely some differences and some nuances, and I think that variety is what keeps me engaged and keeps me excited about the work. Is you have to think critically. No two clients are the same, and every day is different, and that's both challenging and fun.
I love that. And on that note, for the last part of our segment, Nicole, maybe let's talk about you for a little bit. How did you get into this? Like, what brought you to Fourth Economy? What really got you into this field of work?
Yeah. So I came to Fourth Economy. My previous job was in economic development, but from the tech startup innovation venture space. So after grad school at Chatham University here in Pittsburgh, I started working at a regional startup incubator here in the Pittsburgh region. We serve southwestern PA, so a 10-county region. And there, I ran an accelerator program for social enterprise companies. We also had a funding program for immigrant and minority entrepreneurs. And we also had a food and farm business funding program, which is a passion area of mine. My graduate degree from Chatham is in food studies from the School of Sustainability there. So
Wow.
food runs deep in my family. My grandfather, my mom's side, we're French Canadians, so we have
Mhm.
that in our blood. And my grandfather was a chef, and he's taught all of us how to cook. So, so really, really interesting. I think from an economic lens, that work in grad school is really focused on, again, systems. How's the food system work and break down? How do we make improvements in supply chains and expand markets? So that's kind of how I got into the startup space, is working with some small food companies here in Pittsburgh in grad school, really kind of falling in love with entrepreneurship. I think of myself and Fourth Economy as very entrepreneurial. It's that ability to see a problem, kind of diagnose it, iterate, build a solution, iterate again, and convince other people to come along. That's kind of the entrepreneurial journey. So that work was really rewarding. I got to help, entrepreneurs one-on-one, do a lot of coaching and, business model development, helping them develop their ideas. We were pre-seed investment. So the very, very earliest stage, typically outside of like a friends and family investment that someone might, here's a couple grand, good.
Right.
uh,
That's
I'm tired of you talking about this. Just go do it.
Yep. Yep.
So pre-seed investment, which was very unique at the time in the Pittsburgh startup space.
Okay.
And again, we were my passion in that work was helping triple bottom line companies. So in all of those programs that I mentioned, we were working with businesses that had a positive impact on people or the environment as well as, being profit focused and, attracting an ROI. So for-profit companies that have a social good component. And I think, through that work, I really, again, being embedded in that community, really learned how the entrepreneurial ecosystem functions. We do ecosystem development work at Fourth Economy, and it's really fun to kind of, look back at my notes and say, do you have all these elements? This is what it takes to have a really strong, high functioning entrepreneurial ecosystem, funding at all levels and kind of wraparound supports. I think that's the lens that I came to Fourth Economy with. And again, I think, Steer really shares this is looking at systems, understanding how do they work or not work. And really, I think, what is really rewarding for me is it's that ability to empower people to take control of their economic future and really drive change. And I think that goes back to the entrepreneurial piece of it. It's, it's not being planned for or upon, it's planning with the community. And that's what really inspires me about the work here at Fourth Economy.
I love that, Nicole. Nicole, we're just about out of time. Any parting thoughts for our audience before we sign off for today?
Sure. Yeah, I think, just kind of returning to where we started a little bit. I think, it's been really great to see, I think, over the past, several years, this emerging focus on, and really prioritizing things like equitable development, prioritizing and valuing inclusive engagement, bringing people into conversations about their community that oftentimes haven't been invited to conversations, really doing deep engagement with community members that have a variety of viewpoints. I think that's such an important piece of what we do. And again, I think we're seeing some of that come under attack. And I think it is a little bit troubling. But, I think, it makes sense when you think about this is a moment of backlash because the economic system has historically failed so many people. And so I think if you have that in mind, and I try to remember that, it's okay. Let's acknowledge that, and let's really use that to encourage that inclusive development. It really, I don't think the economy can work if it only benefits a few people. So, I think getting folks to realize, you have to be entrepreneurial and you have to do it yourself, but you also have partners at the table that can help you make change. Wealth building and social well-being don't have to be at odds. And I think that, again, is a value that we take forward, even in these times when we know a lot of environments have kind of changed. So I think that's something that I can maybe end on and just just mention that's kind of what drives me, and I think a lot of us here at Fourth Economy.
Thank you, Nicole, so much. If you and our colleagues at Fourth Economy and Steer are able to bridge those gaps in our communities and our regions, my goodness, I mean, think what we could all do working from that same playbook. I really appreciate the time that you gave today to talk, and to all of our audience. Thank you for listening. This has been episode 3 of Inside Steer, Conversations with Experts, and hope that wherever you're at, that you're able to make a difference in the world today. Take care, everyone.